couple of weeks ago, Nan and I left here, my wife and I left here, and I had a meeting to go to. It was in the middle of the afternoon. And as we walked out the front door, Nan, my wife, who's very conscientious, as we got to basically to the mailbox out there on the big circle, she said, we just planted these flowers here this week, so I need to water them. I wasn't that excited about it because I had to get somewhere. However, and by the way, while we're here, there are plenty of opportunities to serve around here. If you like to do like gardening, do I have a deal for you? But anyway, so Nan went back, got the garden, this hose, big black hose, was hooked to the wall right out there to the right as you come in the main entrance. And she pulled it out there, and then she begins to water the plants. Very leisurely, I thought. And so she waters away, and I'm like standing first on one foot, then the other. So I thought I would help her with it. So I reeled the hose back in as she got finished. And just as she got back, the hose, and the two of us, got back to the spigot, the water faucet, somehow the hose, the end of it, the nozzle, got away from us. I say us. And it fell to the ground, which opened the nozzle, and for some reason, the nozzle stuck open. The handle hit, and it stuck open. The only problem was I was standing right above it. So it was sort of I don't know if you can use this word in church, but there's sort of a bidet effect. And I'm saying, for gosh sakes, what are you doing? And, and some of that. And so Nan apologizes to me. In fact, and so now I got to go home. I got to put on a new pair of pants because I'm wet from the bottom up. And I'm still a little irritated, to be honest with you. And so Nan apologized. But on the way home, she apologized several more times. But every time she'd apologize, she would look away and burst out laughing. That's not an apology, honestly. And so, anyway, I didn't think too much more about it, but that wasn't the right response. A couple of weeks before that now, there's sort of a pattern emerging here. We were in Washington State at a couple of national parks out there. This is Olympic National Park. We're camping there, and we were back in Rainier. You can see a couple pictures of Mount Rainier. And in the middle of this trip, we had to get another vehicle. We had been riding with somebody who lived out there, and then we had to go get another vehicle. So we had to pick it up at 6 o'clock. Now, vehicles were very scarce, expensive, rental vehicles. And so 6 o'clock, and we kind of fumbled around. And it's right at 6 o'clock, and the address we've been given to pick it up was the wrong address. And so we're going down one-way streets and all kinds of stuff, and I'm getting more and more agitated because I'm afraid that when we get there, we won't have a vehicle. I had checked several weeks earlier on a van, and the cheapest van we could get was for 8 days was $2,400. Can you believe it? I don't want to buy the thing. I just wanted to rent it. And so anyway, so we're 10 minutes late, 10 minutes after. Now, again, Nan being very conscientious, she wanted to fill the vehicle we were in up with gas. And I'm like, let's go. And so we're driving. We finally got the right address. We're driving down the street. It's 6:15. We should have been there at 6. And Nan says, why don't we stop and fill this one up with gas? And I said, for God's sake. Now, I really did. See, I have compounded my sin there. I haven't said that for a long time. When you use God's name, I don't care if it's his, how you use it. It's the same as GD. If you're saying, oh Lord, stuff like that, you're using his name. I'm using his name as an expletive. That's news for some of you, right? That's what I did. And I felt terrible about it. And I'm 5 of us in the car, and I'm going off. I felt terrible about that. I said, what's going on in my life? Because I used to do this, but I haven't done it for a long time. What's happening? And maybe your question is, what's that got to do with what we're doing here? Well, God showed me a pattern and a connection here that has to do with what we're learning. Let me just give you a little bit of review. So if you're new or you've forgotten it, then it'll hopefully catch you up. We're in Luke chapter 10. the Gospel of Luke, and we are working, or which we have been, and will continue to in one way or another, working on the primary directive that Jesus gave us. You all know what it is. It's in every gospel. It's in the book of Acts. It is just the operating assumption, command, really, in the New Testament. It is to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. That's what he said to do. And so we want to be doing that as a church. If we don't, I mean, we can do a lot of other good things. That's kind of like looking at social media at work. It may not be a bad thing, but it ain't the job. And this is the job. And so Jesus knows this, so he gives us sort of a primer. He gives us a sort of an operator's manual on how to do this. And let me just take you real quickly through the last 3 weeks that we've been in it. Luke chapter 10, verse 1. After this, the Lord appointed 72. I'll say it's not just the 12. Now he's broadening the scope of it. He's including us. And he sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. So the first thing is we are sent. And so that's for all of us. So why don't you say that with me? We are sent. Oh, no. Don't. Say, I am sent. Let's own it. I am sent. Say it. I am sent. That's not all there is to it. Though the second verse, Jesus told them, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask, or in some versions, pray the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. So that's the directive there. Ask the Lord, pray the Lord of the harvest. So why don't you say with me, I am praying to the Lord of the harvest for workers. Say with me, I am praying to the Lord of the harvest for workers. Say it. That's kind of long, so you all get it. Oh, no, you can do it this time. I am praying the Lord of the harvest to send out workers. So that's the second thing. The third thing, verse 3, go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. If you want the treatment of these, go back for the last 3 weeks and look at them. But what's the imperative here? Go. So say with me, I am going. Say it. I am going. Now, some of you said that kind of hesitantly because these 3 things are not true of you, are they? They're not true of me in the way that I want them to be. So why not? Because this is critical to what Jesus has asked us. Not just asked us, Jesus has invited us into the most significant and wonderful thing in the world. He has made all kinds of promises. We get to change the world. We get to change our world. We get to change people around us. You're going to see a story here in a few minutes. Just put yourself in that place. Say, man, that would be so cool if I could do that, if I could be a part of it. Well, the deal is that you can. But the question becomes, why don't I? Why can't we? Well, I don't have all the answers. Probably you don't either. But I know a fundamental, basic one. And God used my time card. We fill out time cards here to keep us honest because we're naturally dishonest. But as I looked at my time card, I saw a pattern. And maybe I'll let you look at it. You see, it doesn't matter about the number of hours. I really want you to just look at it, in toto, that is, in its entirety. What do you see there? Let me tell you what I see, what I did see. There is no white space in this thing. That is, every day I'm doing. Now, I'm not overworked. That's not the point here, poor Woody. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that there's no white space in my life. And the reality is, I suspect there's no white space in your life, or there's not much. And this is critical. You can't add anything else until you get rid of something. And all of us, we understand what this is, what the deal is here. And so what can we do about this? What is the directive? Well, let's look at verse 4. In verse 4, do not take a purse or bag or sandals, and don't greet anyone on the road. What does that have to do with the price of eggs? Don't take any shoes, and don't even say hi to people. What kind of ministry, make disciples, is that? Well, you do need to know a couple things. One of them would be that greetings in the world that Jesus lived in were very elaborate. Well, that is when you would meet, and still are actually in that culture, when you would meet somebody, you would clasp hands with them, and then you would say that you had this certain thing you would say to them, and then they would say it back to you, and you would do this 10 times. Then you would start into another part of it. That is, you would say this thing, and then you would kiss the other person's beard. Obviously, this is for men. And I hope. And so, that went on for 10 times. And sometimes it was elaborated into meal. It was to ask everybody in your family. It was a time suck is what it was. And so what Jesus, it kind of gives us a hint here. What is he saying when he says this? Well, here's what I think he's saying. This is what I know he's saying. Is that Jesus is saying that in order for us to be about his Father's business, in order for us to be making disciples, that we must simplify our lives. A book I read, and most of you probably have heard of it, is Thoreau, who wrote Walden. And he said that most people live lives of quiet desperation because their lives are so full and so frantic. He said, and that's why I went to the woods, to Walden, to live, so I could suck all of the marrow out of the bones of life, that I could live, really live. And then he finishes it by saying, simplify, simplify, simplify. So how do we do that? That's not all there is to it, but like I said earlier, if we don't have space in our life, there's nothing else that we can add to it. And so simplify becomes something, and I think most of us are familiar with the need for this. So here's what we're going to do. If you look at Ephesians chapter 5, be careful how you live. Be careful how we live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity. It is redeeming the time. Literally, exagorizo. It's the word to redeem. It's the word that's used of us. It's to buy it and make a profit with it. To make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what the Lord wants you to do. And so that's what I want to do and what we want to do in the next few moments as we remove the things that allow us to become and be who God invites us to be, the privilege of serving, the significant life that he offers to us. That's what we're talking about. Now, when I was a little boy and in elementary school, nobody here probably is old enough to remember this, but one of the little newspapers that they gave every elementary kid in those days was called the Weekly Reader. And the only thing I remember from it, this is pretty much true for my whole educational experience, the only thing I remember from it was one time it had an article that says, in the next 20 or 30 years, the greatest challenge for people will be, because of labor-saving devices, will be what to do with all their spare time. I read that again, maybe in the 90s, with the advent of cell phones and that sort of thing. But that has not really turned out that way, has it? In fact, there's another book I recommend to people sometimes. It's written by Richard Swenson. He's a doctor, an MD, and it's called Margin. And he talks about margin in our lives. And his premise, one of his premises, is that the more labor-saving devices we have, the less margin we have. We would think it'd be the opposite, wouldn't we? But I knew that was true because that time, Nan and I owned a small lumber company. And as I said, just before the advent of the cell phone, and I would get in, a car, truck, whatever. I would go to the lumber company, and I would spend my afternoon working hard, driving an end loader, pulling stuff out of the kiln, putting it in. But then we got cell phones, and it didn't make us more efficient. In fact, I was tethered to that thing all the time. And my life changed, actually, as a result of it. And your life is, even surveys, people surveyed say 75% of the people surveyed said that my devices, my electronic devices, have a negative effect, 75% on my work. That is, there's over 8 hours a week that a person spends just checking their cell phone, not for work, just checking their cell phone. There's over 3,000 deaths a year, and probably, as they say, multiple. It's really a multiple of that, because people are driving with their. In fact, it's so dangerous that they've made laws that we can't do it. And I don't know if I was coming back from Richmond this past week at night, and I'm coming down the interstate, and I'm trying to do something on the phone, and I ran off the road. How many of you have ever either been run into or thought that was going to happen, or you've run off the road or whatever because you were distracted by your phones? Raise your hand if that's ever happened to you. Yeah, there's some of you. The rest of you are lying, or you don't have phones. We know that they are, that they are distracting us. And we say, Well, basically, I'm multitasking. Do you know that recent research shows us there's no such thing as multitasking? You're not multitasking as much as you are task switching. You're task switching. My illustration, because a lot of my life's been spent in the outdoors with outdoor pursuits, and I've taught and taught canoeing for years and years and decades. And I can look at a person in a canoe and tell you almost immediately whether they know what they're doing and they're efficient or not. You know how I know? Because they're changing their paddles. They paddle first on one side, then on the other. First on one side. See, anytime in a canoe your paddle is not in the water, you're wasting time, energy, and effort. You've got to keep the paddle in the water. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'll be glad to explain it to you later. But you can see the point. And that's task switching. And that's what we do rather than multitasking. In fact, and why is this? We are afflicted with something called hurry sickness. That's what John Ortberg and other people have called it. You've heard this, perhaps you've heard this story. When John Ortberg, and I like his books, I listen to him teach and all that. He was a pastor in San Francisco. But anyway, he had a mentor whose name was Dallas Willard. And he called Dallas Willard at one point. He said, Dallas, this is all the stuff I'm doing, and I want to do it well and efficiently and effectively, et cetera, et cetera. What should I do? And there was a long silence. And finally, his mentor spoke up. He said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And so John Ortberg wrote it down. He said, that's good. That's really good. That's going to be a good one. What else? And there's another long silence. And his mentor said, that's it. Nothing else. There's been a book written by that name, and John Mark Comer wrote it. And it reflects something that afflicts me. I've talked about this before, and then this week I'm very sensitive to it. The last couple of weeks, I'm very sensitive to it once again. And that is traffic. Let's just take traffic. I'm afflicted with hurry sickness. As I go down the road, I can tell you where I was this week, and it repeats itself. And how many of you, maybe you identify with me? When I pull up to a stoplight, I have this algorithm that I'm using as to which lane will go first, will go the fastest. Are you with me? And so I look at how many cars. I look, is one of them a tractor trailer? Is it loaded? Because that means it'll be faster. I'm so sick of the disease that I have marker vehicles in the other lane. And if that marker vehicle gets ahead of me, it ruins my day. Or this week, Nan said, would you go by Kroger? And would you pick up something for me at the grocery store? So I'm going, now here's the checkout aisles. I'm going down the checkout aisles like this. What am I doing? I'm looking to see which one's the shortest so that I can go in that one. The problem is by the time I finally figure which one it is, I go back and somebody's gotten in that one. But that's hurry sickness. In fact, this is true. This happened to me. Not this week, but I'm checking out the lines using my algorithm. And I get in a line, it's only one person in front of me, and there's 2 or 3 people in each of the other lines. This is a blessed day. But the cashier, she or he, whichever, starts to check out. So it's got half a basket of stuff, so it takes a little bit. And she finally gets to the end of the process, says, that'll be such and such. And then this woman, happened to be a woman, could be a man, probably not. You can write me at my email address is jwilkinson@Blue. No, it was an older woman, and she had a voluminous purse. I mean, you could get a Volkswagen in that purse. And so she starts digging in it. What is she looking for? What do you think she's looking for? A checkbook. Who uses checkbooks? I'm old. I don't use checkbooks except maybe Bedford County, which charges me to do it with a credit card. And so, and then she pulls it out. She finally finds it, pulls it out, starts writing on it. Why couldn't we have filled this out before? And then she gets the number, she writes the number down, and then she has to find out where she is in the register and write down that check. And by this time, All those people in those other lanes, they have all gone home. They have eaten supper. They have gone to bed, and I'm still in this line. I have hurry sickness. You do too. We don't even know that we have it. I mean, I've lived long enough to watch people start to and worship at the shrine of the golden arches. Now, when we talk about the golden arches, we don't talk about good food, do we? We don't talk about even cheap food. We talk about what? Fast food. And if that's not fast enough, we designed drive-throughs so that children and families can eat in vans like God created them to. And so we have hurry sickness. You know it, I know it. And in fact, this hurry, as John Ortberg says, is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life. Did you hear me? It is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life. So what can we do about it? Because it has spiritual implications. Somebody said, if the devil can't get you, if he can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. And that's true. I never had a great thought in a hurry, to be honest with you. You can't build relationships in a hurry. And so what do we do? What does God have to say about it? Well, I don't have to belabor this because I think you already know what he has to say about it. In Mark chapter 4, in Romans 12, I'm sorry. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. That's what I'm praying for, changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. That's what we're praying for. That's what this is about. And Jesus repeatedly hammers this. As I said, if you look at Mark 4:19, now you all know the story. It is the story, one of his parables about the kingdom, which is what Jesus is about. It's what we're about, or about. It's how do we get into the kingdom and how do we get other people into the kingdom? And so he's telling this story, and maybe you're familiar with it. It's the parable of the soils. There's 4 different kinds of soils, and there's some guy who's broadcasting seed, and some of the seed falls on really hard ground, and the birds come and eat it up. And then the second seed falls on real shallow ground, and it sprouts up, but it doesn't have any root. And so when the sun gets hot, it wilts. And then there's a third kind of seed which falls on good ground. It grows up, but the thorns and thistles and honeysuckle and stuff choke it out. And then there's a fourth kind which grows, it grows in good soil, and it grows up and it produces fruit. Well, this is the third one when Jesus is explaining it. But all too quickly, when the message is choked out by these thorns and bushes and stuff, all too quickly the message is crowded out by the worries of this life. That's your honeysuckle. That's your Johnson grass. It's crowded by the worries of this life, the lure of wealth, and the desire for other things. So no fruit is produced. No fruit is produced. We're planted to produce fruit. But none is produced because it's crowded out. And the Old Testament does the same thing, just to make sure we know, just real quickly, Psalm 46, be still and know that I'm God. That is, we can't know God if we don't slow down. How many of us ever created a significant relationship and we're always in a hurry? Some of you know how it doesn't work, because you're always too busy, always in a hurry. And we could go on. Let's look at the next passage, which actually is in this passage. It's so important. Jesus put it twice in this passage. And you know the story of Martha and Mary. And their sisters, really good friends of Jesus, along with their brother Lazarus. And Martha's she's a type A personality. So Martha's getting all the stuff together. And Mary, she's sitting at Jesus' feet. So Martha gets upset. She goes up to him and says, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Simplify. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. And we could go on. I mean, Jesus talks about it in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 6. He said, therefore, don't be anxious, saying, what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? What do we eat? What are we going to wear? For the Gentiles, those who are not followers, seek after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Simplify, prioritize, and all these things will be added to you. And God said, I'll take care of it. You can spend your time trying to get them, and it'll never be enough. But if you put first things first, I'll make sure that the second thing and things get filled in. This is what God has to say about it. And so, what do we do here? What is something practical that we can do? Well, let me give you just one step. This is not the last word, but one step, and the step is this. When I teach sometimes these covenant groups, they're high capacity, high demand kinds of groups, because that's what being a disciple means. And the first thing I do when we start one of these groups is I come to the people and I say, look, I can't add anything else to your busy life because I know you're already too busy. So you go home and you come back to me with a list. Not a to-do list, but a not-to-do list. Because if there's not space created in your life, my life, then nothing will ever be able to flow into it because it's already full, overfull. And so people say, they go home, they come back and they say, let me give you some examples of things. What do you think? They might say, I think I can do less TV. I think I can do less social media. It won't be just little piddly things, though, I'll tell you. It's what happens here oftentimes is the greater the expense, the greater the value of what you get in return. And so I'm not saying that this will be easy. I'm saying that sometimes you'll have to cut out things which are really significant or important for you. In fact, let me show you, or let you listen to a story about a guy who did just this. So let's watch.
Well, I'm Mark Johnson, and I had invited a couple of my friends to church, and they came with us. And the one Sunday that Peggy was talking about, the Encounters group, one of the guys that came, he said, I feel like I should be going to Encounters group. And the other one said, yeah, I should be too. And he said, but last year it was Tuesday night, just like it is this year. And that's our kids' hockey night. I guess it was that Sunday. Peggy came up and she said, we want you to be the table leader. Immediately that created a conflict because I knew it was Tuesday nights. And I really wasn't willing to give up Tuesday nights because I don't miss anything that my kids do, or I try not to. And so I knew that was going to be a big sacrifice. That morning was Communion Sunday. And I took communion and I went over into a dark corner where I thought nobody could see me. And I just got on my knees and God just broke me. And you're getting ready to take communion. This represents the sacrifice that I gave for you. Can you not give me Tuesday nights? How can you argue with that one? So we did. We gave him Tuesday nights. So through that, I said, if you guys want to go, I'll sign up and we'll all go. You go in and you're just thinking, hey, I'm going to do this, and maybe they'll grow a little closer to God.
I knew of Encounter, had never come. Mark and I talked about it and I decided it was time for me to come. It was a huge sacrifice on both of our parts for a small reason, giving up our kids, hockey nights, but there's a bigger picture. I gave my life to Christ through Encounter. It actually was October 30th of 2018. From there, just continued on along the journey, noticed more and more of God pushing me, and it was time for baptism, and I knew it was the right move. The day of baptism, it was almost our whole table and then some got baptized that day.
My girlfriend actually told me about Encounter Group, so I came out one night and stuck since. We ended up at a table with a great group of people. Mark, our table leader, has been a very big inspiration. And I don't know if I'd be quite where I am today spiritually if it wasn't for him. And it was actually during a conversation with Mark that that led to me giving my life to Christ. And he said that I didn't have to wait to try to be perfect. That was something I had always worried about, was trying to be 100% right the whole time. And I gave my life to Christ at Encounter, and I knew baptism was the next step.
I started going to Encounter the first week that it opened up in January. My fiance and I heard about it. When I first started going there, it was kind of uncomfortable because I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know how this whole Encounter thing was going to be. I sat down at the table, and Mark was just super welcoming, and the whole table was just really friendly and welcoming, and it just made the experience so much more pleasurable. It's been really life-changing. I gave my life to Christ probably, I think, 4 or 5 weeks into Encounter, and baptism was literally 2 weeks later. So it's been an extremely fast pace too, but it's been really, really good. So I was baptized in, the first part of March, and of course I had to pick Mark to be up there with me. He was the one who oversaw it when I gave my life to Christ. So I wanted him to be a part of that part of my journey as well. And so he baptized me, and it just seemed, and everybody from the table was up there with me. It was an awesome experience.
Being a part of Encounter, of course, it's also strengthened, my relationship with Christ. But being able to be a part of a baptism and to see them start to get why what God had for them was so much bigger than we could ever hope or dream. It's very undescribable. It was amazing being able to see that and to be there with my friends.
And so the application, by the way, technically, somebody came up to me after the last service. The Encounter group has just started, but here at New London, it's on Thursday night now, and at Bedford, it's on Wednesday nights. But the point of this was that Mark gave up something, and he got something greater in return. He simplified his life so that God could flow other greater blessings into his life. And maybe that's what he wants you to do. In fact, I'm sure that's what he wants you to do. So as we sing this next song, would you just look at your life and then say, where can I simplify my life? What can I cut out of my life? You've been given a card and a pen. Write it down, then write down the name of somebody that you're going to tell what you're going to cut out of your life to just provide accountability for it. But would you do that as we sing this song? Because it's going to take, for it to ever happen, it's going to take something called surrender. Would you stand with me as we go back into the world to do what Jesus asked us to do? Lord Jesus, we surrender. I know there's some who've never surrendered to you at all. I pray that they would. There are others who have not surrendered pieces of their lives that are just wrong. They know it. I pray they would surrender it. There are others of us who have really good things that our lives are full of. But we'll never do the best things if we keep hanging on to the good things. And I pray that we too would surrender. And then we'd end up joining you, working with you, for you, experiencing your pleasure, your changes in us, your transformation, and making disciples who make disciples who make disciples. And we pray it, Jesus, in your name, for your sake, and for your pleasure. Amen. Okay, see you guys next week.